Before we start, we'd like to note that this episode discusses themes of depression, self-harm and suicide, which may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners. If at any point you find this overwhelming, please stop listening. If you feel like you are in immediate danger, please call 111. Welcome to the Elevate podcast, brought to you by the Registered Master Builders. Each week we explore the ideas and practices that help us get the best from our businesses, our teams and ourselves. I'm your host, Ryan Castle. We talk to experts, advocates and business owners in the construction industry to share their knowledge, insights and experiences to help you build a better business and enjoy a better life. Now let the business building begin. Today on the Elevate podcast, our guest is Alan Farragher. He doesn't mind a yarn and is quite the character. He is the founder of Diamond Workwear, a brand tackling the mental health crisis in the construction industry with innovative, colourful, high-vis shirts. After becoming a father, Alan had to review his attitude towards work-life balance and mental health, which sparked his desire to help others. With extensive experience in construction sites in Ireland, Australia and New Zealand, Alan is dedicated to making mental health conversations more accessible. I think you'll enjoy our chat. Alan, welcome along to the Master Builders Elevate podcast. Great to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And look, we're excited to dive into all things mental health, and you've had a huge commitment to this, but maybe just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit, can you tell us how you got started in the construction industry?
Yeah, so I obviously come from a long line of builders. So my grandfather was a builder, my dad was a builder, and it seemed just natural progression. That's kind of where I ended up myself. My earliest memories were jumping in the van with my dad on a Saturday, school holidays, just helping out, and it became a love for me. My dad is a carpenter joiner by trade. It's something that I really enjoyed doing. So that's kind of the career path. I love creating stuff, building things. Woodwork was just obviously was the ideal career for doing that, because there was a visual of what you had created at the end.
Indeed. And Alan, probably fair to say that from the accent, you didn't grow up in New Zealand. What's the background there?
No, so originally born in Ireland. I was there until I was about 21. So I had an old man's life when I was over there. So to give you a bit of a backstory on me, my mum passed away when she was only 41. 6 months after she died, my dad had a brain hemorrhage. So at a very young age, I took over the family business. So my dad obviously was a builder. He had a couple of guys employed. I think due to stress and everything else, obviously with my mum was sick for 2.5 years. So obviously there was, a lot of stress for a long time for him, plus the business as well. So after he had his brain hemorrhage, basically, he was lying in hospital, and his phone was ringing. People were wondering where he was. His guys hadn't showed up to finish the job. I explained to them what had happened, that, he was just after he was in hospital, he suffered a brain hemorrhage, and, he was a pretty serious condition. Everyone was real understanding. They said, look, we'll take over. We'll get someone else to finish his work. And knowing my dad, I knew that how proud he was of the work that he did, I knew that even if he was to die that day, he wouldn't die a happy man knowing that someone else finished his work. So I said, look, I'm happy to take on that role. So I jumped into kind of a leadership role at the age of 16. So I had only just officially started my apprenticeship at home. I went back and talked to my boss and said, look, I think I need to step back and kind of finish what my dad had started with, at least the jobs that he had actively running. So I took on almost a director's role at 16. A lot of guidance from my nearest and dearest. My dad's, accountants and lawyers and everything else helped me quite a lot to get up and going. But we went from strength to strength. My dad's health came back. He had a long road of recovery. In the whole time, I think people were just, I don't know if they were inspired by the situation or not, but the company started to grow, and we actually grew probably 4 times bigger than what we were when I first took it over. I think that was just how the economy was running in Ireland anyway. But for a very long time, I had a really responsible role as a young man. So from the building side of things, we had it up and going. Things were going really well. Then obviously we had the economic downturn in Ireland. We almost overnight, the building trade just came to a complete standstill. So because I had so many people that were loyal to me while my dad was sick and they helped us out to keep the business going, I felt a responsibility to them to keep them employed. They looked after our family when we needed it. So we felt this was the time to return the favor. So we dug deep and we tried to find a way out of it. And we ended up pivoting the business and turning it into a logistics company. So we pretty much had the raw materials. We had the guys, we had the vans, we were just changing up our skill set a little bit. We went back and spoke to the guys and said, look, the building trade it's gone. There's no work there at the minute, or if there's work, there's no money. We have an opportunity. What do you think? Some of the guys were actually starting to get a little bit older. So they actually thought this actually might be a good road to retirement for them. So they jumped on board, loved it, thought it was great. Originally it was supposed to be just a gap filler until something came along. But the guys actually enjoyed it so much, and it gave them a lot of free time because their days changed from, the 9 to 5 or 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening, like you do in the building industry. And they were up at, 3 o'clock in the morning. They were back home again by lunchtime. So they felt like it gave them a lot more time in the day to do whatever they needed to do. So we kind of more or less stepped away from the building trade and stuck in at the logistics, and that company is still running to this day. But after going through all the highs and lows of basically family health, loss of my mom, trying to build a business from a young guy that didn't know much about it, the economic downturn, trying to pivot the business. I think I was about 22, having lived a 50-year-old man's life, and decided that my dad was back now in the business, and decided that it was probably time for me to get out and explore a little bit and have a bit of me time, basically. So yeah, I jumped on a plane, ended up in Australia. My brother was there, liked the weather in comparison to Ireland, and keep traveling. And I felt like New Zealand was the closest to home from what I'd heard from everyone. Scenery wise, people, the culture. I thought, let's give it a go before I end up going home. So I did, left Australia, came to New Zealand, landed in Christchurch, bought myself a little camper van, travelled around the South Island for 6 months, ended up coming back to where I'd started, back to Christchurch again. Met my now partner in Christchurch. So obviously, as that started to develop, I decided let's hang around for a little bit longer, see where this goes. Ended up getting a job in the construction industry. I started off with Brian Perry as a civil carpenter. Yeah, I ended up loving it because there was a little bit of difference to it, so there was a little bit of another skill set that I had to learn, but that wasn't just carpentry work. So it kept me motivated, it kept me interested, and it just so happens that I fell in love with it, fell in love with the country, fell in love with the work, and I've been here in New Zealand now for, I think I'm coming on to my 8th. I'm either in my 8th year going on to my 9th, or in my 7th going on to my 8th, but 7-8 years, something like that. I've been in New Zealand. Got 3 kids now, and very much settled. New Zealand is very much home for me.
Right. And it's quite an incredible story you've got there, Alan, and a story that started with such deep tragedy, and just your ability or desire to jump in, help out your dad at the time, help shape that business, pivot across the logistics when the construction industry wasn't working. It's such a great story. I've got plenty of follow-up questions, but the most important one is, which rugby team do you support now?
As you put me on the spot,
I'll make it easy for you. Who do you support when we're not playing each other? When Ireland and the All Blacks are not playing, who's your favourite?
Obviously, All Blacks are in the house, and the kids are very much that way. As much as this is, my dad's going to dislike this, the kids only have All Blacks jerseys so far. So, I still remember my roots, but obviously, New Zealand is home now, so we have to support our own country.
Yeah, good job, Alan. I love it. And Alan, let's turn our conversation to Diamond Workwear. It's a company that you've started, and it comes with a special message and a special meaning. Can you tell us the journey of how you got Diamond Workwear started and why you chose to?
Yeah, so Diamond Workwear, for people that haven't seen it yet, we like to call it a social impact workwear brand. So we've taken the the normal high-vis shirt. We've added a little bit to it to pique people's interest and to start asking questions. But how it all came about was when I was going through my journey of growing up within the construction industry and stuff, I looked at things from a very one-sided. I looked at it from the owner's perspective, what the owner needed. And I was very much driven on trying to get, completion of jobs and turnovers and secure procurement of new work. And that was my focus. And I didn't so much focus on the guys that were helping me up through it. I think it was because I was so young in the industry that I didn't really fully understand that you have to have a very inclusive kind of a workforce and understand them. And I think that came to me more so when I stopped working for my dad's company and started working for someone else. I was very much pushing what I thought was the owner's side of it, where it was pushing the guys for driving them to hit targets and, driving them to work Saturdays and to do the long hours. And I didn't really, that's the best way of putting it. I didn't really understand when they weren't there and when they didn't have the same buy-in to the job as what I felt I did. I didn't really understand why guys used to leave early. And I used to be probably that boss that was just a horrible person to work for when I was in the foreman and site manager roles and stuff. I used to find with guys when we got to real pressure points of the job, a lot of them used to disappear. Rather than trying to figure out why they were leaving or what the problem was, I just looked at them as being unreliable, didn't care about the project. And I think my attitude towards them was probably not the nicest when they came back in, because I was more or less, here's the guy that let us down. Then I ended up having my own kids. And when I had my kids, my outlook on life changed completely. So I've got 3 boys. My oldest boy is 4, and I've got twins that are 3. So when the twins were born, the twins were 8.5 weeks premature. Luckily, when they were born, they didn't need any intervention, but they still needed to go through the full term in NUCU and through the incubators and stuff. And I think that was my turning point. I would think it was middle of the night. One night I was sitting in there looking at these 2 tiny little babies in the incubators and knowing that my job was to protect them and was to look after them. And when I went outside the door, I kind of looked at, I won't say I went negative, but I looked at all the horrible things in life that was ahead of them and all the tough roads that they were going to have to go down. And I started to look at my own kind of career path and what I was doing. And then I think a few days later, when I was back in the workforce again, I think we had one of them, key points or the trigger points at work where it was key that we got something done in order to meet a concrete pour or a deadline or whatever it was. And there was one guy that left. I said, look, mate, I need to go. I can't be here anymore. And he walked out. And usually I do the whole, why the hell is he going? He's leaving us again. But I changed it around. I remember kind of seeing my 2 boys in the incubator and I thought to myself, I wonder why he's leaving. I wonder why he always goes. So rather than being angry with him, when he came in the next day, I said, look, can I just ask you a question? Why is it that you always feel that you need to leave? And he just said, he told me the truth. He said, look, I've got a commitment at home. He said, I'm like you. I've got young kids. He said, my partner, he said, is waiting for me to get home. If I'm late getting home, he said, it puts stress on him because his partner is dependent on him to get home. He said, it makes family life really hard. He said, if I'm not home when I say I'm getting home. And he said, obviously that toughness, then he said, I dragged that into work. He said, because then I started to blame work that they put me in this situation. So it really opened my eyes as to, we have to basically get to know the staff and understand them and figure out what they're doing. So as I started to dive into it even more, I felt there was a very common kind of common feel with all the guys where they all felt that work was just pushing them. I heard a lot of statements of it was profit over people and it was no one cared. But obviously being kind of the medium between the guys in the ground and the guys in the office, when I started to bring the information back to the offices and say, look, these guys need this support or they need this, I thought it was going to be met with, because of how everyone's preconceived idea that management didn't care. I thought I was basically going to be going up against a brick wall. But surprisingly, they were very open to help, because they were, up till this point, they were not aware that people needed the support or that we're going through these issues. So obviously management have their own roles within the company and they are focusing on what they need to do to keep driving the business and keep moving it forward. If they don't hear from the ground up they're going to assume that everything is running fine. I think some people put a barrier in place and think that they're not allowed to go and talk to management, that there's a separation between the field staff and the office staff. I tried to bridge that gap. And I found when I did bridge it, that the management, the owners of the company, they were more than willing to work, because they taught me something that without the guys on the ground, the business doesn't exist. So they're like, we have to make sure that everyone feels inclusive and feels part of a team, because he said, once you're part of the team, he said, you'll work better. So with that kind of knowledge in mind, I started to implement that a little bit on the ground, with being more open and understanding to the guys that had needs of couldn't work late because they had commitments. They had kids, had sports or whatever on the weekends. So I knew not to ask them, which didn't put them in which didn't make them feel as if they were letting you down by saying no in the first place. And I found that because I got to know the team, we actually worked a lot more efficiently and things were working a lot better. Guys were happier coming to work. They knew what was expected of them. I knew what I was expected out of the guys. So it got me thinking of how can we do this where we can basically start conversations and open it up and get people comfortable with talking about, their needs and their mental health as well. Because like I put mental health, I think if we mention mental health, we go to a very dark place and we think the worst of it. Whereas me, when I think about it, I think it's the small things that can develop into bigger things. So that's why even with the shirts, when I decided to set up this Diamond Workwear to be the conversation starter, that's why we have gone with the loud, colourful patterns on it. It's to my take on it was to brighten up the conversations. When you mention mental health, it doesn't necessarily have to be the greys and the blacks and the darks that you normally think of. I wanted the shirts to be basically a brighter side of the conversations. And it is simple things like, talking about your home life or your needs or your whatever that you're going through. And for me, I think what it was for me when I was a parent and when I became a parent, your kids don't come with a manual. So when you bring your kids home, they're crying, you don't know what's happening, you put a lot of pressure back on yourself and you think, what am I doing? How am I failing? I went through that for a while. I kind of wore that for a few months, thinking that I was failing as a parent because, I didn't know what was wrong with my kids and they were crying at night time and they seemed to be awake more than everyone else's kids. And when I opened up and started having the conversation with the guys at work about the kids, they gave me their experiences, things that worked for them. And we tried a few things and a few things actually worked out for us. And we just thought, oh, why didn't I ask that question 2 months ago? And I wouldn't have been struggling with all this. So it all became kind of clear to me that we need to create something which will encourage conversations in the workplace, whether it be, mental health, lifestyle, fitness, anything. Just, open the doors to people to feel comfortable to talk. And I think the shirts are a very good way of doing that because, again, like I said, my experience I don't class myself as being any kind of mental health expert. I've got no training in it. I just have my own experience in it. But what I've found is since I've started on this journey that once you mention that you're doing something to try raise awareness around mental health, people feel comfortable opening up and telling you their struggles. And they know that I've got no background in I'm not trained in mental health or psychologist or anything. They just know that you are okay with the conversation and with listening to people. And people start to basically open up and they tell you their struggles and what they've gone through and they feel better. You feel better because you've allowed to give them that opportunity. And I just think that we just need to find a way of being more inclusive on the work site to talk to each other.
I like that, Alan. And a term that we use a lot in our own business is mental wealth rather than mental health. For that same reason, I think wealth brings it into the positive and going, oh, what are you doing to maintain your mental wealth and being in a good spot? So I like how you're also facilitating that conversation. It doesn't, again, have to be dark. It can be keeping people in a really good health, mental wealth state. So like that. What's been the most interesting comment you've had when someone's seen you wearing the shirt? Because for our listeners, they're a very bold design. Yes, it has a big portion of orange on it, but the collar, the sleeves, the bottom part of the shirt are all this very broken glass design, I think you refer to it as, Alan.
Yes.
And it's very colourful. You can't miss it when you see someone wearing it. What's been the most interesting comment you've had?
I suppose people are just interested to want more just what's it about. I suppose, people are like, well, it's a bit funky. It just does exactly what it's supposed to do. People are curious about where it came from, what it's about. Some people are a little bit, initially when they see it, they go, whoa, that's a bit, I don't think I'd be confident wearing one of them because it is quite bold and it is quite bright. And I've had a few people say, it's a bit funky. I don't know if I'd be comfortable wearing one. And then you explain the meaning behind it. And surprisingly, once you explain the meaning behind it, people that originally said, oh, it's probably a bit too colourful for me, turn around and go, love the message, love the idea, definitely I'll wear one of them. And I think what was surprising to me was I originally thought when we started this that we'd have a bigger uptake from the younger dynamic in the workforce than the older guys. A lot of the older guys that I initially didn't even think would entertain the idea, were all about it, loved it, and they were so keen to basically to don the shirts themselves and to get out there, because I think myself, they have obviously gone through a lot more struggles. They understand how hard the industry is. And I think that they are the ones that want to change it for the up and coming. So like I said, I originally thought it was going to be the younger dynamic that was going, yeah, these are a bit cool, a bit funky, a bit different. Let's wear these. I think, I was quite surprised that it was the older generation that said, love the idea, love the message. They've told me some things. So some of the guys have opened up and told me a few things about what they've gone through. But a lot of them, you can tell they've had a past or they've had a story, and rather than telling theirs, they want to open the door for other people to tell theirs before it becomes a struggle. I think some of them, from what my kind of take is, they've gone through it, they've dealt with it, and they don't want other people to have to go through the kind of the toughness that they had to endure when they were growing up.
Well, nice way for them to give back, right, and help pave the way for the next generation. It's great. And Alan, I understand that some of your profits that you make from the shirts, you pass those on to the charities that are helping with mental health. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. So originally, I wanted to set this up as a non-for-profit, was my original. But obviously, again, there was a lot of learnings on trying to set it up for a non-for-profit. So you have to have board members. You have to have a charitable license. You had to have certain kind of accountants, chartered accountants. And they all came at a cost. So it was a cost that I couldn't afford at the time. So we changed it, and I put it into a 50% of all profits will be donated to mental health charities in New Zealand. Because again, like I said, I'm not qualified in any way to offer any after care for people that need it. But I am trying to align myself with the people that can offer that support and make it so that it's free to people to do. There's loads of organizations out there at the minute which help people, but they are limited to their, how many sessions they can give for free before it becomes at a cost. I'm trying to pick up that cost after the free sessions are done. I want to be able to be there to donate to the people, to basically be able to give back to them so that they can continue on their journey and getting help when they need to do it. The 50% is until I feel the company is established enough to look after itself, and because obviously there's a lot of growth that's involved in this and getting more orders and new stock and trying to expand the range a little bit. But my hope is that within from 3 to 5 years, that we can actually turn it into a non-for-profit.
It's a great cause that you're pursuing, and the contribution you're personally making to help facilitate more care in the industry is incredible. So if people want to know more about Diamond Workwear, where do they go?
So we've got a website, which is diamondworkwear.co.nz. If you go on there, it gives you my story, my why. You'll see my beautiful boys. They're feature on it. They are my kind of driving factor behind it as well. And it gives you the option to buy the shirts. Currently, our next lot of stock has just arrived in Littleton. So it'll take probably about 2 weeks for it to get here. So if you go onto the website, we have taken away the buy now button, but there's a feature in there where you can leave your details. And once the new stock hits the shelves again, you'll be the first to know. So we'll basically send you an email and say, look, stock has arrived. We'll reactivate the e-commerce store again. But again, the reason we've done that is because I want Diamond Workwear to be a good experience for people. So I don't want them to be on a long wait, to buy a shirt or to put a deposit on a shirt and then not get it for 4 weeks or 5 weeks or something. I want it to be a positive thing. So I basically want to be able to deliver as soon as people decide to buy, and we want to be able to deliver them. So
like it, Alan, and great that you're running out of stock. It must mean that plenty of people are in there wanting to look good on the work site, but also facilitate those conversations with people as well. I notice on your website, Alan, you have the hashtag asking for a mate.
Yep.
What does that mean?
So we use that. Basically, asking for a mate was, so I think initially what it was is if you wanted to buy a shirt for your mate, that was kind of where we aimed it. But also I think asking for a mate is, getting to know your mates and asking them if they're okay, and being able to talk to them, and don't accept when someone says to you, how are you today? Most people will just give you the, I'm fine, or I'm okay. I think sometimes we need to move past that and go, no, that's your reflex answer. How are you really feeling? And I think if you get to know, you know your mates, you know your work colleagues that you're working with, and you look up and sometimes you'll think that they're not acting, the way that they should be. They're not themselves. They're doing things differently to how they normally do. They don't interact with certain things. So I think what we're trying to do is encourage people to, number one, ask your mate how they are today and genuinely want to know the answer. If you don't feel you've got the answer for them, and probably bring it to your management and say, look, I've noticed a change in my mate for whatever reasons it is. And it's just making people aware. Like I've worked in companies where sadly we have lost people. And the one common thing that we've found once you go back through it is people always say, if we knew, we would have been there to help. So I think asking for a mate is basically asking your mates and checking in on them. And if you don't feel as if you're getting the answers, or the mates might not be comfortable telling you what they're going through, then it's pass it on to your management and say, look, I think you might need to have a chat with them or keep an eye on them at least.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, and also thank you for the incredible work you're doing to bring the conversation around mental health and mental wealth to the fore, getting people to open up. We have statistics that we are not proud of in the construction industry, and every little person like yourself making that positive contribution makes a huge difference. So thank you, and it's been really enjoyable chatting with you today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
If you need further help, there are helpline services available 24 hours, 7 days a week that offer support, information and help for you, your whānau and friends. You can give a free call or text to 1737 for support from a trained counsellor. You can also refer to Lifeline on 0800 543 354, 0800 Lifeline, or free text 4357.